Hello, and welcome to the Trepa Technologies Security Plus course. My name is Johnny Bandon, and I will be your instructor for this video series. In this video, we will cover Domain 5.4, risk management processes and concepts. So let's get started. We must be aware of many different risks in our enterprise. External risks are any persons or groups that pose a risk to our systems that come from outside our networks. An internal risk originates from inside our networks. This could be a malicious insider, even mistakes by an authorized user that are not malicious, but could affect our systems. An example of this is a user posting their work in a public cloud so they can keep working from home. A legacy system is always a risk in our environment because they are no longer being patched or maintained by a vendor. Any vulnerability on legacy systems will not be patched, so it'll be up to the security team to implement security mitigations to protect legacy systems if they cannot be upgraded. A multi-party risk is anything that can affect multiple different organizations. This could be a city blackout or a cloud zone/region going down. Intellectual property theft is always a risk if your organization develops proprietary technology or software. NDAs are proper controls and policies that you must use to help prevent IP theft. And again, that stands for a non-disclosure agreement. Now let's go over our different risk management strategies. Risk mitigation is applying controls to reduce the probability or magnitude of a risk. An example of risk mitigation will be implementing network segmentation on legacy systems. This doesn't altogether avoid that vulnerability, that legacy system, right? But it can help mitigate the attack vector by putting some segmentation. Risk avoidance is a strategy that attempts to eliminate any risk in the environment. An example of this is patching or upgrading old legacy systems. Risk transference is a strategy that shifts the impact of a risk to a third party. An example is purchasing cybersecurity insurance for an organization instead of addressing the known risks that you could potentially fix. And then the last risk management strategy we'll talk about is risk acceptance. Risk acceptance is a risk management strategy that deliberately chooses to accept a known risk and to continue operations with that risk. So that's accepting that there's a vulnerability in your network and you're just going to keep driving on. Now let's go over some risk analysis. Inherent risk describes the original level of risk that exists before you implement any control in a network. Residual risk is a risk that remains after you implement the security control. Then risk appetite describes the level of risk the organization is willing to accept. A risk register is a document that provides in detail all the risk in an organization. Often this document will not be used to communicate risk to upper management because of how technical and lengthy you want this document to be. This is usually for you and your team. A risk matrix is a graph that represents the risk to an organization in a business-friendly format, right? We got colors and critical and some numbers to go along with it. A qualitative risk assessment involves identifying threats and labeling their potential impacts on the organization. A quantitative risk assessment uses numerical data to quantify the risk to organizations. This is achieved by assigning a number value to the magnitude and impact of an exploited risk. The likelihood of occurrence is described by the annual rate of occurrence, or the ARO. The annual rate of occurrence is determined by SMEs, or subject matter experts, and is the expected number of times a risk will occur each year. For example, an RO of 2 means that a risk will happen twice per year, which is a high ARO. Now let's go over other risk analysis terms that express risk and damage in dollar amounts. An asset value is expressed in dollars and is determined by the cost to acquire, replace, or deprecate the cost of an asset. The exposure factor is the percentage of the asset expected to be damaged. And then the single loss expectancy is the amount of financial damage expected each time a risk materializes. It is calculated by manipulating the AV by multiplying the AV by the EF, excuse me, not manipulating. And then we have the ALE, the annual loss expectancy. This is the amount of damage expected from a risk each year. And again, this is a dollar amount, and it's calculated by multiplying the single loss expectancy with the annual rate of occurrence. So if our SLE is 40,000 and our ARO is 0.5, our ALE is 20,000. Some quick math, right? Now let's go over the BIA, or the Business Impact Analysis. This is a document that will quantify the impact of failures or risks being exploited in the network. So the MTBF, the mean time between failures, is a measure of the reliability of a system and is the expected amount of time that elapses between failures. The MTBF should be a high number, typically spanning months or years. If you have a system with a low MTBF, it may be time to replace the system or figure out why the system fails so often. MTTR, or the mean time to repair, is the average time it takes to restore a system to full functionality. The MTTR should be a low number. The RTO is the recovery time objective. This is the amount of time that an organization can tolerate a system being down. If a single system brings down your enterprise, the RTO is low. We want systems with high RTO. Then the RPO is the recovery point objective and the amount of data the organization can tolerate losing during an outage. Single points of failure are systems that are critical to the network with no redundancy. Having a single point of failure is not healthy for a resilient network. Single points of failure should be remediated in your systems. A good thing I like to go by or saying is 2 is 1 and 1 is none when it comes to technology. And then DRP is the disaster recovery planning and is the discipline of developing thorough plans to recover operations as quickly as possible in the face of disaster. All right, I want to thank you for watching and stay tuned for our next video where we will go over domain 5.5 privacy and sensitive data. Thank you for viewing.